A number of you have said that you want to use the Excel approach to testing PPP. This is an example of data downloaded from EIU, and as you can see, it downloads the data into separate worksheets now, which is slightly annoying. So you have to take the data from the worksheet and cut and paste it into onto one worksheet, and I've chosen this one. And you download the data you want. You must do it carefully, and it is just simply you block it, Control C, you then go to the square you want to start, and then you go on to here, paste special, values, transpose, like that, and then you get the values like this. So that's what I've done here, and that collects the values. Then I want to process them. For that I chose a separate sheet, and this is the sheet tidied up. First of all, the original data that I had from the previous worksheet. We've got the date, I've got the percentage change in the CPI, France and the UK, and the exchange rate. So that's just copied from the original file. Then I wanted to test the formula, so I put EF, the familiar formula here, and this could Control C, could have an equal sign here. Note that if you want to put the equal sign, you don't want it to turn into a formula. You have to put a little asterisk, a little inverted comma before, and that then just gives you the equal sign. So I would rather like that to be, sorry, just messing around now. This relates this data to the formula. I've taken the trouble to put in the equal sign and the minus sign to show how the data is being treated. Okay, so I then processed it into the formula, and this is the predicted EF from NFL home minus okay. I've made these squares wrap the text, which is that one there, so that it always fits in. The point about doing it this way is that it's clear. This is a familiar equation, so rather than just leaving it like that, we put it into that, and this is clearly the right hand side one which I have started, and it's simply the two subtracted there, so that's straightforward. And Control C. Now there are different ways of doing this, but the important point is that it should be clear. When you're reporting this data, I think you don't want to have tables that are too full. Personally, I would probably, you want it in the text to start with, but I would just report the beginning like this. So Control C has gone to another sheet, put it like that, and then we put in some dots. Try and get them a little darker and perhaps a little bigger. Yep. then go back and take the last 3 like that, put that in here, those are a little bit big, I think. Just make that a bit smaller. That's better. And we can, if we go to View, click on View at the top, and take off grid lines like that. If you then do Shift Print Screen and then Control V, and you can then trim it using Picture Tools, crop, do this sort of thing hundreds of times. And that, and then crop the other side, and like that. Okay, so now you've got a little picture of the data, and you can cut and paste this into a Word file. You shouldn't. So Control C, Word file. So just wait a bit. So your project, got all the words, etc. And there you've got a decently presented. Control E puts it in the center. You've got a decently presented table. Right, that's nice and clear. As a table, you must, however, give it a proper title. So Table 1, and put in the French and UK rates. So that's approaching a proper title, and note that I've said things that you might think are obvious, but you must nevertheless state it, make it clear. Always remember the reader. The reader is not necessarily me, it's not necessarily Gia. It might be the external examiner. So he may just glance at your project and look at the diagrams and tables, and if he sees that it is properly annotated, he will kind of move on, which is probably the best thing. So, and down here you want data source EIU and own. Okay, so you need to put that in as well, and I think we can have that on the left. In your project, a table like this is relatively clear. It's not perfect. If I was doing it again, I would say, okay, we only need this to 4 decimal places. We don't need it to all these decimal places. And you find yourself doing the same thing 2 or 3 times before you're happy with it. But it's just going round a loop. It doesn't take very long. So this is to emphasize that presentation is hugely important. The reader is not going to spend time trying to work out what on earth you were doing. So please think of the reader, make it clear, explain what you're doing, explain the way in which you develop your project and the kind of story it's telling. On that theme, if we go back, you'll see that I've prepared this, which would be another table, and in this case we have the predicted change and the error. So that plus that equals the actual, and that might go well in a little footnote to the table explaining that. This is, as I was saying, our familiar formula, and this is a kind of way of looking at the error. So we've got that this column should be defined as percentages. So we just go down here and go to percentage. Okay. So that completes that. It's a good idea with a table such as this to, and again you kind of report the first half dozen or so and the last half dozen, and then present a picture of what you're looking at. Okay, so as I was saying, it's a good idea to take one example and explain it properly so that people know exactly what's happening. So if I was to take this one, we'd say that inflation in the UK was 2.56. In France it was 1.55. So there's a prediction that the value of the euro should increase by 1% for PPP to remain, to hold. In fact, it increased by 2% more or less, which means that we have a 1% error. It underpredicted by 2%. So putting a little asterisk and explaining that value from your table helps the understanding as to exactly what you're referring to. Then I've also included a table here. It's always good to relate these theories to practice, and in this case PPP can be viewed as, say, a company importing goods from Europe and experiencing and comparing the two items where the UK price compared to the cost of buying it from abroad and the different inflation rates in each year. So in this first year there's 2.48 inflation in the UK, and the change in the cost of the foreign goods is foreign inflation. The euro price would go up, plus the change in the value of the euro. When we so foreign inflation is 2%, similar to the UK, but the value of the euro fell by 2%, making it more or less 0% or minus 0.21%. So because of the change in the currency, the net cost was virtually unchanged, in fact went down a little bit. But in the next year, UK inflation was 2.88, and the price of the euro goods went up by 3.4. So, looking at this, one way of measuring it is, as it says there, taking the UK price rise less the foreign import cost of price rise, UK price changed relative UK price rise less foreign import cost price rise, UK price change relative to the French price. So it changed by 2.69, but then in the following year it went down by minus 0.52%. Here I've put in the cumulative because clearly if it's going up one year, down the next, you kind of want to know, well, okay, how does it compare over the years? So we can say here that in the first year it was 2.69. In the second year it was 2.17 higher than the 93 second quarter price. Then it was 6.25, so it was getting more expensive. Then it dropped a little bit, and then it went down to being, by the time it got here, it was the price in 95, the increase in price 95 to 93 was more or less the same as the UK change in price 95 to 93. So it looks at how these changes accumulate, because clearly there's some offsetting here. Okay, well, you might want to look at it in a different way. I'm not saying look at it this way. There are many ways of doing it. If I was to do it again, I would probably reorganize it. But the general idea is that we start from the basic data, we relate it to the formula and explain it like that. Then we relate it to a business implication such as that. And with all these, you want to devise some pictures. I've only done one of the cumulative change, and what you do is you use the graphing functions of Excel, and also again choose a point and explain one point in the graph in the notes. Now I've done this in Excel, but then I did a screenshot of this, so this is the screenshot of that. Okay, and this is much more stable, and you can do as we did it in the last one. We can include it in the project and add a proper title and footnotes and so on. This is a kind of work in progress, if you like. It's looking at the difference in inflation rates, it's looking at the error over time, I've not put that in yet, and it's looking at the actual, and it's just showing that in fact the difference in interest rates is pretty stable compared to the change in the exchange rate. That's work in progress. How you devise your charts, how clearly they are expressed, this is all critical. You want also to measure how good this is what it's doing. It's measuring how well the formula fits. You might want to put a scattergram on this and put a 45-degree line on it. So this is just the beginning, and you need to think carefully about presenting your results and explaining your results, because that is absolutely key to any report. This chart is beginning to show that the actual change is not really related at all to the difference in in inflation rates as predicted there. Right, well, I hope that's given you some idea as to how to approach approach the problem of testing purchasing power parity using the Excel approach. I've done no more than add and subtract figures, but as I hope you can see, there's a lot to do in terms of thinking through the problem and presenting the data and explaining it. If you wanted to do IFE, as a number of you have, then instead of inflation it's interest rates, and the basic scenario is, what if I invest abroad? I get the interest rate abroad plus any change in the value of the currency, because the underlying idea is January I converted to, say, Mexican pesos, I got the Mexican peso interest rate, and then in December I converted back to pounds. How many pounds did I have in December compared with my £100 in January? So that's a kind of business scenario that's being addressed. Good, right, well I hope that's helped you in the Excel approach to testing some of our equations.